Welcome to Blockchain Recorded, the podcast for the tech curious, where we talk about anything and everything related to the exponentially evolving crypto, blockchain, and Web 3.0 space. Our mission is simple: to share knowledge, facilitate discourse, and help evolve education in blockchain fundamentals, decentralization solutions, and relevant use cases for today's digital economy. We at Blockchain Recorded are not registered investment advisors and do not deal with financial or trading token elements, nor offer any licensed financial services. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only, while the opinions of all parties involved are their own. I'm your host, Nina Cerar, and now let's talk blockchain. So before I introduce our guest today, I have a couple of brief updates for our community. We invite everyone to join us on Twitter Spaces, where we pre-stream each episode the day before it goes public on all major podcast platforms. For the platform list, visit our website, blockchainrecorded.com. We also have an NFT program with Blockchain Recorded Community NFTs. These can be claimed from our homepage. So check us out, visit our website, and follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube for updates and potential airdrops. And without further ado, today's guest is Ashley Scott Meyers. He is a writer, producer, and director. He is best known for the movie The Pinch from 2018, The Rideshare Killer 2022, and Rush Lights from 2013. In addition, he's a screenwriter and blogger of sellingyourscreenplay.com and has created an NFT project in conjunction with the movie The Rideshare Killer. So Ashley, welcome to Blockchain Recorded.
Hey, well, Nia, thank you very much for having me on. That's quite a nice introduction. I really appreciate it.
I actually have a confession to make. I'm so sorry I have not seen the movies. It's
totally okay. You're in good company, believe me. So yeah, no, and that's one of the things I think people don't outside of the entertainment industry. They don't fully realize there's a whole industry of sort of low budget movies that get made that a lot of times we don't hear about. And some of these movies I've done, they have pretty decent casts, people you've actually heard of. When they're not doing studio films, they'll come and do some of these independent films. But they don't get a ton of airplay. It doesn't necessarily make it to the multiplex around the world. But there's an industry there. Yeah, these low budget independent films.
Of course, no, it's okay. I'm not always the blockbuster type. I enjoy indie films as well, and also from the international spectrum. But these I have to admit that I have not seen. But I do obviously I should do my homework and see The Rideshare Killer. But anyway, tell us more about yourself. You're the first film industry person that we have on our podcast. So if you can talk about your film industry journey and
Sure.
and how you came to experiment with Web3 and NFTs.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm like a lot of just Americans. I grew up loving movies, but I grew up far from Hollywood in Annapolis, Maryland. So really on the East Coast. I didn't know anybody in the entertainment industry. So it was really just a love and sort of passion of films that fueled that. I went to college, really had no idea what I wanted to do. So as an accounting major, I realized by the time I was done, I really wasn't probably going to be a very good accountant, much less do anything I wanted to do. So I just decided, me and a buddy just decided to throw all of our worldly belongings into a beat up old pickup truck and just drive out to LA. And we did that. And, it took us a few years, but we eventually sold a script called Dish Dogs. And in the 90s, this was sort of the mid to late 90s. And there was a sort of a whole industry back then. If you remember back, like the Academy Awards, I think it was like 1995, 96. It was the year The English Patient won, and that was considered an independent film. It was a big movie,
that was a
but
big
it was
deal.
It was, but it was sort of an indie film. So there was a real hype with these indie films, and there was some real appetite for them. The DVD market was still very much at play. People were buying a lot of DVDs, so there was still sort of a channel for some of these smaller movies. So I sort of rode that wave a little bit. We sold Dish Dogs, and then I was getting into, again, it was the late 90s, and I was sort of getting into technology. So I started to set up websites just for my screenplays, just a little website. It's still around, ashleymeyers.com, and I just list log lines for my screenplays, and I use it just as a marketing tool, and eventually got a job in, it was Web 2.0. I'm not sure we knew it was Web 2.0 at the time, but this was about 2001 when the .com was really at sort of the height of the bubble. So I sort of got into technology. As I sold Dish Dogs, I made a little bit of money, but still needed to kind of make some money to live and continue to build my career. So that's what I did. I got into technology and continued continue to sell, to write and try and sell these screenplays. And eventually, sort of we getting down maybe 10 years later, 2010, 2012, I started to just realize I continued to option and sell some of these scripts, but it wasn't really creatively fulfilling. So I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go and make my own movies. And that was the pinch in 2018. I went and did that film, and it was just self-funded, self-produced, and I just got that done. And then over the years after that, I started to watch, really it was TikTok that got me into Web3. My kids are, they were young, probably 12 years old, 11 years old at the time, and my oldest daughter wanted to download TikTok, so I didn't know anything about it, so I let her download it, and I downloaded it myself and started watching it. And just for whatever reason, the algorithm started giving me a lot of this Web 3.0 NFT crypto stuff. So I just started to learn about it really through that. And then as I got more interested, I would look around at what else, on YouTube or wherever else I could find information. So I started to learn with it like that. And then as we got done, this is my most recent film, The Rideshare Killer, we just started thinking, me and the other producer, Tony, we just started thinking about ways that, we could potentially market the film and just ways that we could sort of be on the cutting edge and sort of get involved in what I consider to be a great technology that really could help films in the future. So that was sort of what we arrived at, was we decided to mint every single frame of this. It's an 84-minute frame, 25 frames per second. So you can do the math on that. It came out to about 120,000 individual frames, and we minted them all into one-of-one original NFTs. And now they're on Rarible.com and OpenSea, and we're just out here trying to market and really starting to build our community around this project.
That's a lot of frames. So if it's like nearly 120,000, it's a lot of frames.
Yeah, and keep in mind, again, ours is a low-budget, short horror film. It's only 84 minutes. So you start talking about 2-hour film, 2.5-hour film, you're talking about, 200,000+ individual frames.
Have these frames as NFTs, have they been claimed? Or like how does it stand as it is now? It's,
I would say it's very slow. I mean, we're starting to we got done at the beginning of this year, and we're starting to push them now. So a few of them have been sold. We're starting to do some giveaways. We're just trying to really build a community around it.
Got it.
And maybe this ultimately ends up being sort of a proof of concept. Can you actually mint that many frames? I was not able to find any NFT campaigns that even had that many frames in them. I think the biggest one I ever really heard about was the Trump one that had about 50,000. So 120,000 is really a good number of frames. And I was worried about, would there be some Y2K bugs? Like, can you even mint 120,000 into one campaign on the blockchain? I couldn't find any writing on this, or nobody had done it as far as I can tell. So some of it is just that, getting out there and doing that. But we're sort of in the building, the community campaign, and maybe we should have built more of a community beforehand. I think that's maybe one lesson from all of this.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll definitely pick your brain on the technicals in terms of the minting and the frame and the NFT, the actual technical part of it. But before, if you wouldn't mind, just, like I said, we haven't had a guest from the film industry, let alone a screenwriter. Can we just first dive in more general speak, and if you can talk about how you see the film industry respond. I mean, we're talking about NFTs. NFTs is just a component of Web3. But how do you see the film industry responding to Web3? I mean, feel free, you can start with what's happened in the past with films and crypto. And then again, crypto is a speculative term, right? So I think it's important to distinguish, crypto from blockchain, from Bitcoin. Our audience is a bit more knowledgeable in terms of what the differences are, but still, I mean, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So what I found, and again, just going back to what I just said, I really didn't start to watch these TikToks on crypto till probably 3 years ago. So we're talking 2020, sort of the beginning of the pandemic. But before that, just as a producer and a writer, I was out there trying to sell my scripts. So this was around 2017, 2018, where I was running into a lot of these producers that wanted to do these ICOs, and they were going to basically mint their own coin, their own token, and sort of create sort of their own little world that would revolve around this. But it was really a mechanism for funding their films. And some of them did it better than others. Some of them seemed more sincere than others. But the one thing, I knew for a fact I didn't really understand the technology. And so when I would talk to these producers and start to ask them some questions, Americans, it became sort of clear to me that, frankly, they didn't really understand it that well. And so it always just made, I optioned my script to some producers and they I'm going to go do this ICO and, whatever. As the writer, I'm really not that into it. They can raise the money however they raise the money, but it always felt a little bit like a money grab to me. It didn't seem like they really cared about Web3 or technology or really any of the sort of underlining good parts of crypto. It just became a way of, hey, maybe we can make a quick buck and fund these movies. Funding independent films is very, very difficult because so few of them actually make money. So I understand sort of the impulse of a producer when they hear about a potential way to fund a movie to kind of jump for it and explore it, because it's the hardest part of all the parts of making independent film. Getting the money is definitely the hardest part. So again, that was a few years ago. I didn't really get that involved with that, but it just didn't really seem all that great. And again, it was a pre-production thing. It seemed to me just the way where I was in, because I've done some Kickstarters to fund some of my movies. And it really just felt like a Kickstarter with sort of the luster of Web3 on top of it. You were basically giving some producers money ahead of making the film in hope that the film would get produced, and then you could sort of be a part of that community. But again, it just didn't seem, as a film fan, it just didn't really interest me. I never gave any money to that. I wasn't really into crypto, but it just didn't really inspire me as a film fan. Now, more recently, what I've been getting is the producers are coming in. I get a lot of this through my own podcast. I have some connections with publicists. So when filmmakers finish a film, they come through my desk. So a lot of my knowledge now is coming from that, in addition to just reading stuff. But what I'm getting now is I do get producers coming where they've got a finished film and they were able to raise the money through NFTs, partially or in whole or whatever. But again, it's more of it's been a pre-production mechanism, just like Kickstarter. You create some artwork. Typically what I've seen is they've created some artwork, whether it be a poster or just some artwork that's sort of loosely connected, or not even loosely, it's artwork that's connected to the film. They mint that into NFTs and then they try and build a community. And again, some of the people that have had success with this are people that are fairly famous. They already have a following, so they're able to kind of bring that community along for the ride. And there's been some success with this for sure. And all of this is so new. Like, I'm just one guy. I could be completely wrong. Maybe this is the future of how NFTs or movies are gonna interact. But again, as a film fan, it didn't really get me excited to buy a bunch of artwork that was created before the film was even done. Right. It felt more just like a Kickstarter. You could do the same exact thing with a Kickstarter. You could make a bunch of artwork and you could basically sell off the artwork through things. And yeah, the blockchain validates, and there's some things that go along with the blockchain that are nice. But again, as a film fan, I wasn't quite sure how that really gave a lot of value to me as the film fan. And I can tell you too, as someone who has a screenwriting podcast, the people that are in the film industry, they're still not even in the industry. I take that back. The people that are sort of the film fans and that sort of person, they're a long ways from really being involved in crypto. There's still a number of technical hurdles that need to be sort of overcome, because most of the people that are into film, they're not overly technical people. So to try and get them to buy some NFTs, and that's really, I think, one of the big hurdles I'm facing with my own project is I can tell when I talk about it on my own podcast, it's just crickets. Nobody even knows how to go and buy one of these things. And in fact, my producing partner, he's older than myself, and so not really into Web 3.0, but we thought this would be a good experiment. Hey, Tony, why don't you go see if you can buy some of these NFTs just to sort of work through some of the technical hurdles? He was unable to figure it out. So that's the thing. I think there's still quite a bridge that needs to be sort of crossed with just sort of the average user getting into film. And that's the NFT people understand how to buy NFTs, but the average consumer that might ultimately want to be a part of this, I think there's still a ways to go.
Sure, yeah. So it sounds like one of the things is to merge both worlds, right? To be able to kickstart the adoption process, or just onboard people so that they know what to do. Just a few steps back. So you mentioned when you say film industry people are not really yet in what's going on with Web3, or just knowing how to use it, or et cetera. Who are so film industry people? So this is like So people like yourself, so screenwriters, producers, directors, I mean, is this the people that you're talking about?
That's a good question. And yeah, I mean, I definitely think, and these are people that I'm like the indie guy. So I don't really know what's going on at a place like Disney, but I can tell you Disney is, they are minting NFTs. They are experimenting with this. So I'm sure they have a whole branch of people that are looking into this, but on the indie side of film, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The people that I meet, producers and stuff. And again, it feels to me like they're people that are getting into it more just because they see opportunity as opposed to understanding this technology and appreciating the technology. Now, I'll give you a counterexample. One of the eureka moments for myself, as I was getting into this, I decided, okay, let's just start looking at some of these films that have done this. And one of the fellows I ran into was a filmmaker named Trevor Hawkins. He's a Midwest filmmaker. I think he's in about Michigan. And this guy is a real artist. He's not like someone that's just looking to grab some money. But he was one of the first films that minted some of his frames into NFTs. And I had him on my podcast. Now, he didn't make a ton of money with this because he just wasn't able to scale it. But again, it was a good proof of concept. But that was my eureka moment. I literally asked him that question. I said, well, why didn't you mint every frame into an NFT? And he had the typical artist comments was, well, some of them are blurry, some of them don't look good, because he's a real artist. He doesn't want all of these frames to be out there as NFTs. But for me, as someone that is into crypto and stuff, I sort of think that's what's cool. I think ultimately Disney, Marvel, indie films, we need to mint every frame into an NFT and let the fans, that's part of the ethos of crypto is, the people they get to decide, the community gets to decide what are the valuable frames, what are the cool frames. It's not top down, it's bottom up, and let the fans decide what frames are cool, what frames deserve to be, the valuable ones. So that was sort of the eureka moment for me where I had him on, and he was sort of pushing the envelope a little bit further than it had been pushed, but I still thought, hey, I could mint every one of my frames into an NFT. And that was, as I said, I think that was sort of my eureka moment was literally interviewing him on the podcast.
Yeah, you just said a few of the right things to say, which is, it starts with the people, it starts with the community, and just sort of backtrack maybe, what you're saying in terms of what your challenge potentially could be, is, or whatever. Absolutely. Community is definitely key, but it's an evolving space, integrating Web3 into different industries. This is our playground. So it's conversations like these that I think that are important to just to talk about this. So you were sort of looking back, the ICO era was definitely not, those were the scammy years. That's when I got into crypto. So, and I was also very, very put off by, what the speculation brought. But just the past few years, you learn that it's not all about that. That's what's going to be important in terms of keeping fundamentals in mind. But I'll allude to that a little bit later. So you've had your eureka moment. I mean, given what you've just said this far, I mean, how do you see the future of film and crypto? I mean, you think definitely the minting every frame is the way to go for now. So what about down the road?
Yeah. So again, and maybe I can back into that a little bit more with just more than just this eureka moment was, again, part of my whole thinking as I was interviewing this guy, Trevor, and bringing him on was I was thinking about my own experience as a film fan. And a lot of that came through my own experience as a kid when Star Wars came out. That was my favorite film, and I bought all of these Star Wars cards. Me and my brother, I think they were less than $1. It might have been 50 cents or 25 cents, and you get like maybe half a dozen of these little Star Wars cards with a dried out piece of bubble gum, and we would take them to school. We would trade them, and we just had fun with them. We would lay them out on our desk. You could flip them over. You could make like a puzzle. Some of the collections would be like a puzzle on the back and stuff. And so to me, that was the cool part of being a film fan. It just, you could relive the moment with your friends, your favorite scenes, your favorite actors in those scenes. And so that's really what I got to thinking when I was interviewing Trevor. I was like, that's the moment for me that would just be cool. And I started to think, what would I love to own? I would love to own a original episode 4, Star Wars NFT, especially if it was minted by George Lucas, as is the case with the Rideshare Killer. Like, I'm the one that's actually physically minted these things. I think that there is sort of a connection to that film that you can just have. There is some sort of a connection. Obviously, the frames from Star Wars, if somebody had minted those, they could still go and mint them, frankly. But those would be very valuable, and they would go up in value and stuff. But again, I just started having these conversations with other people. And what's your favorite film? What frame? Wouldn't you love to have a frame from your favorite film? And the answer is always yes. Of course you would.
Right.
And so again, that is sort of where I see it. To me, of all the things that I've sort of seen and thought about and talked to people, that to me seems like the place that's going to have the most value for the film fan. And so I always like to put the film fan forward. I don't see, and again, I'm not here to poo-poo on anybody else's idea. And if you can make it work, more power to you. But I don't see a lot of value to the film fan in doing what are these Kickstarter offerings. It's maybe, and if you build a community and your community really trusts you and knows that you're going to create a really cool film, then they might be willing to kind of get behind you. But again, I don't really see that as inherently different than a Kickstarter or Indiegogo or any of these other crowdsourcing type of platforms, as opposed to finishing your movie, showing the world how great it is, and then getting people excited about your movie to buy some of your frames. It seems to me that's, the filmmakers taking the risk. They're making the movie.
Right.
They're taking the risk that this film is going to be good. And then if it's good, they're rewarded by the film fans that think it's good and buy these frames.
Right. So, well, you said Star Wars. I take it, are you a Gen Xer?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, my favorite movie is E.T.
Okay. So, yeah, you were right there. And I remember seeing E.T. in the movie theater as well back when it came out. Yeah. So, again, it's an iconic movie. I mean, imagine how much those frames of E.T. going over the moon, if they had minted those, imagine how much those frames would be worth. And in a real sense,
sure.
Not just in I'm going to make a bunch of money sense, but just owning those would be like owning like a Rembrandt or a real piece of, iconic Americana.
Right. It's more of a collector's thing.
Yeah.
But it just, I can't help but think, because you're saying, you speak to people and this could be a potential thing to do in terms of collecting. I think also Gen Xers, we're a different generation again. Is this like more of a generational thing where we are willing to do that? I just feel like with my kids, they don't care about collecting stuff like that. Going down the road. I don't know. Are these thoughts that are crossing your mind? Yeah.
And so again, one of the things that I noticed was, and sort of again, this is a couple years ago as I was, my sort of ideas were evolving, was my own kids. And now I think they're 13 and 10. So this was a few years ago. So let's say, more 8 and 11. They were into the Roblox. They were playing hours on Roblox, especially during the pandemic. And they got into a specific game called Adopt Me. And essentially, as best I can tell, maybe there's more to it that I'm missing, but essentially you go in there with your friends. It's one of these massive, multiplayer role-playing games. You're in there with all your friends, people people you don't know, and you go up to people and you trade these digital animals. They're just like little, unicorns and horses and cats, and you can build them up and you can raise them and feed them and make them, you can combine them and stuff. But essentially, and one of my youngest daughter was even trying to get me to put in my credit card into this. It was some sort of a service that would create these custom, it wasn't an Adopt Me, it was in Murder Mystery 2, and you would get some digital guns and knives and weapons and stuff that you could take into this thing. But it was a really back way of doing it, where you had to go to their website, pay them, then you went on their Discord and contacted them, and then you went into the actual game and they would give you the stuff. So clearly, just from a technology standpoint, Web3 can solve a lot of those problems. Sure. But the bigger thing is that my kids, they do like collecting them, and they very much value these accounts with these Adopt Me animals in them. And they go and they show their friends, and, there's some sort of dragon or something that's like the highest, and some people get this dragon, and it's cool. And you ride this little digital dragon around inside this world. So to me, I saw the opposite. I felt like my kids were very much embracing digital collectibles. They were willing to trade actual real money for these digital items. So to me, it seems like the younger generation might be very open to this. Whereas some of the older people, and when I say older, people my age, when I tell them, film people especially, I tell them what I'm doing. They're like, well, what are you actually getting? What do you actually own? What can you actually do with it? And that's the thing. They're unable to make that leap. But I don't see it as the kids. My kids were very much into it, and their friends are very much into all of these digital collectibles.
Interesting. Well, you've alluded to Disney probably looking into in terms of the framing more. Do you think in terms of production companies in general, are they embracing? I would like to just maybe further get your thoughts on this, like in terms of embracing all this technology.
Yeah.
And where it is. Like, are these conversations that you do have with, okay, you're from the indie spectrum, but, and I don't know how it works. I mean, do indie people talk to blockbuster people in the movie
Yes, there's definitely correct. There's definitely a lot of crossover for sure. Mm-hmm. But I truthfully, no, I'm not. I mean, when I'm definitely the head of the spear on this one, and I don't get a ton of people that have even thought about this as of yet. But I do think, again, if you do some quick napkin math, you think about these Star Wars movies, these Marvel movies, you're talking about in excess of 200,000 frames. They're over 2 hours. So if you just do some basic math, and again, these movies already have, rabid communities behind them. I mean, the Star Wars community, which I'm frankly a part of, I'm not so much into the Marvel films, but they have rabid fans that are into these things. They go to conventions, they go to, all the movies they line up. So it would not be hard for Disney to mint these things into NFTs and have a market already ready to go. And again, you just do some quick napkin math. At $100, if they have 200,000 frames, they sell $100. That's $20 million. Right. If they go if they average $1,000 per frame, and it's not inconceivable that there's 200,000, Star Wars fans willing to pay $1,000. That doesn't seem inconceivable to me. That's $200 million. That's more than the budget of the movie. So it seems to me that once Disney sort of figures out some of this stuff, and once there's actually people embracing it, I think that they will most certainly do it, just because they do have a business to run, and there is some business opportunities. Now, one of the things I've thought about myself, as I said, I'm the first one to do this. I've minted every frame, but now, I'm on top of this mountain, but there's nobody else on top of this mountain. And frankly, right now, there's not even really anybody looking for this mountain. I'm just standing there by myself. So that's been one of my ideas, is to go and find some of these indie films. And I know people who know people, and so I know some of the people that maybe own the rights to some of these indie films. So that's, I think, maybe my next step, is try and get some of these other films. And I don't have any connection to the Friday the 13th franchise, so that's probably not one that I would be able to actually contact. But clearly, that's not like a studio movie. It's not like Disney that owns that one. Right. There's some producers, some production company somewhere owns the rights to that Friday the 13th. There's, millions of Friday the 13th fans. Are they going to get $1,000 a frame and raise $200 million? Probably not. But Friday the 13th would have enough name recognition. So I think, to me, that's the next step, is we need to see a big movie that has a real following go and do this. And maybe I can be a part of it, maybe I won't be a part of it. But I think once that starts to happen, I think this whole thing could start to take off. And again, it's hard for me to imagine there's not going to be some people that don't think about this just as I do and think it could actually work. And there will be companies that give it a try. And then if there's the fans are there buying up the frames, that will encourage other people to do it. I just don't have a following for my movie right now, is sort of the problem. It's the first one, and so I'm still out there trying to just raise awareness for the film. Got it.
But have you you must have gotten some response to your minting project, or has there been response in terms of film industry insiders, others? Like, what have people been saying? Just feedback in general?
Yeah, very, very little. I mean, some people, very little. I mean, some of the people, I've reached out just to podcasts, and I know a lot of the filmmaking podcasters, and frankly, they don't really want to have me on to talk about NFTs. They'll have me on to talk about other things, but they're just not interested in crypto. I think right now, I mean, my timing is probably a little bit bad, truthfully. I think right now, people that are not in crypto or Web3, I think they're such a sort of negative with the FTX collapse and all of these sort of very negative impressions. If you don't know anything about it, I mean, you still have legitimate people. I mean, I watch Bill Maher. I think he's hilarious, but he just thinks crypto is just a complete scam. So when you have people like that, prominent, smart, prominent, reasonable people that are still openly saying all of Web3 is a complete scam, you're going to get a lot of people that are just very skeptical get into it. So that's frankly a lot of what I'm up against. A lot of the film people I talk to, they're very skeptical. Some of them think it's an interesting idea, but they don't even really know enough to even evaluate my project or even tell me if they think I'm onto something or not, because they don't even really have a basis in crypto at all.
Yeah, when you've alluded to Bill Maher, I'm a big fan. I think he's great and says things the way things sometimes should be said in ways that he has. I've been following him for decades. I think a lot of it has to do with just not knowing. I think it's important to distinguish between the terms crypto and blockchain and Web3. I mean, I'll take a few steps back in our podcast, which is it's fine because these are the things that we need to talk about. Crypto still has a negative and speculative sound to it. People still may think it only has to do with speculative digital assets, the Dogecoins, et cetera. They give them a bad rep, but that's just a component. And it's like, it's not all that. It's really a component of the wider Web3 ecosystem, which is the next, let's face it, digital and internet phase. But I think the key thing maybe is it's all about educating, right? I mean, it sounds cliche, it sounds cheesy, but it's educating, but with important key fundamentals to keep in mind. And these key fundamentals, the Web3 advocates and builders who have their heart set in this and are not about pumping and dumping schemes are wanting, to solve are, just going back to basics, online trust, decentralization, permissionless systems, data ownership. We want to control our own data, transparency, traceability, censorship resistance. I mean, I don't want to sound, I don't want to, preach, but I think there's a lot that people are not aware of. And maybe Bill Maher should take a 101 blockchain or Web3 course before saying these things, because it's not scammy. I think in the way what happened with FTX was a good thing because it cleaned out a lot of the bad actors again, and in terms of what we strive in Web3 is it's just the fundamentals are an integral part, and they always get clouded by whenever there's the new hot thing comes along or there's a bull market, and there's all kinds of speculators shilling with all kinds of money grabbing schemes, and each bull cycle gets larger, and with it brings a whole set of misinformation. So it's important to have these conversations in terms of what is Web3, what is crypto, what are digital assets, what are NFTs, what could they be good for, and where this is all going, because it is going somewhere. And it's key to try to distinguish from the well-intentioned builders who abide by the fundamentals that I keep pounding on to the speculators. So we have a lot of ways. It's a long road. A lot of people say that we're in Web 2.5 right now, right? And still trying to figure out what Web 2.5 is. But in the end, it's just conversation, education, trying to talk about it as much as we can to make people realize that it's not just a speculation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I will, when this podcast is released, I will send it out to my list, and hopefully some of those people will listen to it and just get another take on sort of just slowly bring some of those people into the fold. But I totally agree. These are the conversations we just need to get out there, talk about it.
Sure.
And eventually people will hear the message.
Yeah, because, they're not to toot our own horn, but, we are also a podcast that, we're not about talking about the next thing to invest in. This is not a DeFi, I'm not going to say DeFi because I think DeFi can be a good thing. But this is not, we're trying to actually, we let guests on that we believe have good, proper use cases for Web3. And I think these are conversations that need to happen. Whether or not we'll have 100 of them, that's fine. But just to, it's a learning process. It's an evolution process. And it's, going back to what you were talking about in terms of the NFT frames, is just a money-making thing, or, is this the goal? Well, sure, of course there has to be some incentive, but, we want to adopt, the technology is going to continue. So might as well ride the wave and contribute to it. Right.
Yeah. And I think, on the movie front, I think some of the incentive is not squarely on the financial. Like, again, I think there's still a ways to go from a technology standpoint, but I see a time not too far in the future where you'll have some sort of app on your phone where you can just quickly scroll through all of your NFTs and show them to your friends and maybe even just instantly trade them back and forth. from this app. And to me, that's the cool part about it. Are you going to make $5,000 trade? No, but you might just be able to get some scenes and build collections that you think are cool that you can show your friends. And that's, again, it's not the money part. It's the fun part. It's a cool hobby part that gets integrated into all of this.
And it goes to community, also with the digital economy that we're in. Some argue that we're going towards a subscription model, and this subscription model is going to capture NFTs here as well in terms of the technology. People also want to own their own data as well. This is another concept, right? It's not just about collections and this, it's about owning your own data. So yeah, but let's go back to your NFT project. So how did you set up your NFT framing, or how did you go about that in technical terms? It was just you doing this, or did you have a team of people helping you, or is this all?
It's literally
all
just,
Ashley minting his frames.
Yeah, literally just me. So Tony is not technical. He's my partner on the film, but he's not at all technical. As I mentioned, I do have a background in Web 2.0, and really it's PHP, MySQL, HTML. So I know that stuff pretty well. So that's essentially what I did. I mean, I had a bunch of Windows computers and just sitting in my office, and then I wrote a little PHP script. I basically I did an export of all the frames with the frame numbers and put them into a database, a MySQL database on my web server. And then basically I set up these, and so there's a little PHP script that these Windows machines, they'll hit, and they'll be able to tell which is the next frame to mint. And then they just go on Rarible. And I used something called AutoIt. It's a little Windows scripting language on the actual Windows machine. And it just, you click here, you click there. It's not really like the most scalable way of doing it. As I was going through it, I realized it probably was not the best way to do it, frankly, but it took months. But that's essentially what I did. Was I had my PHP script on one side, basically giving information to these Windows machines, and I wanted to mint them. After I started to mint like just two or three of them, I realized I wanted to mint them in reverse order, starting at the end. That way, when people look at them, they can sort by the newest, and the newest will then be frame 1, 2, and 3, and then you can literally watch on Rarible or on OpenSea. You can go there and you can look at all the frames, and it's kind of like a quick glance of the movie as the frames go on. I thought it was a cool aesthetic, so I made some effort to do that as well. But essentially, that's what it is. It was this AutoIt script that was doing the actual clicking on the buttons on these Windows machines, and then those Windows machines would grab information from the PHP script. And there was some order. It's going through. I was doing it physically on Rarible, and then you click the button, your MetaMask wallet opens, and then it has to click over there. There was a lot of weird things. I wasn't always getting messages back, so I wasn't always sure of frames. I had to do a lot of cleanup once the thing was done to go back through to make sure they all got minted, because sometimes you just wouldn't get a message back from MetaMask that you could do anything with. You could tell whether it was things. It took like 4 or 5 months. The price of Matic, this was last April, May, June, July, August that I was doing this. The price of Matic, which we minted on the Polygon blockchain, so Matic was going up and down throughout this. Right. And what I noticed was it started at like $1.40 and went all the way down to 35 cents during this 4-month period. Yeah, but to be honest with you, it was good for us because I started buying. I could see it going down, so I was buying the Matic. I got most of mine, I think, at less than 50 cents. So it ended up, as far as the minting goes, things. But what I noticed was whenever the price was really roller coastering up and down, that's when things would get really, really slow on the blockchain. And it would just get you'd get a lot of weird errors, and you could never tell whether it was from Rarible or from MetaMask or from the blockchain itself. There's just some points of things. One tip I found was I was able to, if you click on MetaMask, they have a little like an aggressive with the gas fee, and I found it was much, much better to just hit the aggressive button. It was only a fraction of a penny more, and that gave you a much greater chance of actually getting through and not getting one of these weird errors. So after about a month or two, I figured that out, and things were much smoother. But I had 2 or 3 computers going pretty much all the time, and I think I got up to about 2,500 frames a day was about the most I could get out of one computer, and that's with no error, not a lot of errors that day, really pumping it out. It was a 25 for 3 computers. I think that's what it was. It's 25 for all 3 computers. I think I could get about 1,000 per computer. But once I put on more computers, there was some diminishing returns from it. Because again, I was trying to mint them in order. So they had to be careful. They couldn't just, go as fast as they could go. They had to wait for the other computers. As one computer was minting, the other one was sort of just waiting, queuing it up. So there was there were some complexities like that. And it did take a lot of months, but that's what I did.
But that's serious commitment from an NFT minting screenwriter and producer.
No kidding. So
I commend you for that. I mean, that's awesome. That's the thing. I mean, if you learn by doing it, right? So, and you've alluded to some of the problems that the blockchains face. Obviously, the speed. When the markets go crazy. But these are all growing pains that hopefully they'll get, I guess, solved through time.
Yeah.
So these legitimate owners of your NFT movie frames, can I ask, so you said you've sold a few. I'm assuming they were not the blurry ones?
Yeah, exactly. No, it's, interesting, and interestingly enough, we had Eric Roberts, Julia Roberts' brother.
I was just going to say, is it like one shot of Eric Roberts?
Yeah, to be honest with you, that seems to be what people are gravitating towards, is just the most well-known actor. They want some frames with him in it.
Yeah,
which makes sense. So that's sort of the direction that it's been going. One of the things that I've been talking about with Tony, and I don't know that it's going to happen on the Rideshare Killer, but going forward, again, you talk about some of the rights. Like once someone buys this, what rights they have. We just use the Rarible smart contract, the default smart contract. But I think ultimately a filmmaker, especially an indie filmmaker, there would be some incentive to actually give the NFT holder some rights, much like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, where maybe they could print T-shirts or action figures or something. You get another angle, because really it's a marketing of your film to some degree.
Sure.
I live in LA, and I'm always amazed. I'll go someplace at how many people are wearing Lakers or Dodgers or stuff, including myself. I have my Laker T-shirt, my Clippers sweatshirt and stuff.
Sure.
And essentially, you're selling this stuff, which is marketing your own business. I mean, your people are paying you to market your business. So I always sort of thought there might be some opportunity there as well, is giving people full rights to exploit these NFTs with action figures or T-shirts or images or whatever else, letting them build a community around their own NFT, much like the Bored Ape Yacht Club is trying to do. So again, that's another potential angle where I think films could go with these.
Yeah, in terms of offering perks to fans, also who hold their NFTs. Yeah, I mean, again, a lot of it comes to community and membership. I think going forward, just with everything that's going on in the world, I think people are, not to get over philosophizing, but there's sort of a deglobalization thing going on, and people wanting to, I think, just have a sense of belonging to certain communities, and whether or not that's LA in the US. I'm based in Europe, so we have like other things going on, but for sure, it's community and membership and just holding something that's yours and knowing that's yours.
Yeah, for sure.
What about, so we've sort of exhausted the NFT topic for now. What about, are you familiar with DAOs?
A little bit. And again, what I ran into was, as I was sort of ramping up my own project, was I was just looking at what film DAOs are out there. And the ones that I would run into, it seemed to me they were trying to sort of build a community, but they were kind of trying to get the cast and crew to join this DAO, and then they would all split the proceeds. And from my standpoint, again, there's always these sort of shady producers that are trying to get cast and crew to work for less than what they normally work for. And so it sounded like a little bit of that, where, because these indie films, whether people want to admit it or not, 99.99% of these indie films, like The Rideshare Killer, do not make a profit. And you might think that, they've got these big actors and this and the other thing. These things are not really making money for the most part. So the idea of creating a DAO that's going to help the crew seems a little preposterous to me, because these movies don't really make money. And, I think crews at this point are savvy enough. I mean, there used to be this thing, it's still around, deferred pay. Oh, we'll pay you something up front, but then we'll give you points on the back end. And yeah, when Tom Cruise gets points on the back end of Mission Impossible, that's a totally different calculus than, getting points on a low budget indie film that's never going to make any money. So they always felt a little bit scammy to me. Again, I'm not here to poo-poo on anybody. So if someone made that work, then for sure, then maybe that could work. But it didn't really resonate with me. Now, some of the ways that I do think that you could have these is, I've heard of like film collectives. I've interviewed people on my podcast that are in the Brooklyn Film Collective, and that's a group of filmmakers that come together. They pool their resources and their money and camera equipment and that sort of stuff. And those are the sorts of things where I think, this would be a great way to run these, a very efficient way to run something like that. A film festival. I run an annual film festival here in Los Angeles. And so, I'm thinking about, would there be a way to create that into a DAO where, people that are filmmakers can participate in a real way and be a part of this thing. And then they have a way of exhibiting their film. When they get a new film done, they have a festival that they know they can exhibit at. So maybe there would be some sort of community there. But in terms of producing films, I haven't seen anything that really turns me on that says, oh yeah, this is a viable way to get out there and produce a film. It just feels like another way to not pay your crew as much as they should be paid.
Yeah. I mean, the first question is always, if you want to ask yourself, what is a DAO going to do? I mean, what are the DAOs supposed to be doing for some kind of organization? I mean, in general, DAO fundamentals, there are a solution to tackle bureaucracy. And I guess, there's a lot of, I guess people get frustrated because there's a lot of, blocking of new ideas by, incumbent management who are high up actors in the organization. But overall, they have gotten some bad rep in terms of that. But if it's set up properly, I mean, one has to understand what a DAO is, right? Again, it's decentralized autonomous organization, right? Those are three main operative words that I think people throughout different industries don't understand, or just want to, say they're part of a DAO to be, part of this new movement. But the whole point is that this is just a tool, right? It's a tool it's meant to automate an organization based on very clear set governance bylaws, a very clear set purpose, with a pre-existing community, ideally, and a treasury management. And all of these components just have to be clearly set out in the, whatever it's called, we call it a white paper. And the other part is that, there has to be an understanding of how the DeFi platforms work. So DAOs must also onboard, a blockchain-based DeFi platform to, execute this, what I mentioned, the set treasury management and everything. So bottom line, it's I think if people don't understand what a DAO is, then obviously that's a problem. It's a tool that is to be trusted. I think it could function excellently in just what you said, the collective, where people have a set purpose together, a community, and together, put this white paper together that's basically the Bible of the whole, DAO, whatever organization.
Yeah. And I definitely think like for the film industry, what I'm talking about, like a film festival, like what I'm running, or a film collective that I mentioned, is these are organizations that have very little money. I mean, these are struggling artists. And when I started to do this, my NFT project, and I start looking around for a programmer that knows how to do these smart contracts and stuff. And it's just, eventually I think it's too early for like the Brooklyn Film, collective, because you're going to need to hire like a real, and I mean, you want this to be right. It's not just something that's off the shelf. You got to hire a real good programmer that knows how to build that smart contract. And I think eventually there's going to be, like, we have WordPress now. WordPress is a very, very sophisticated, well-established, free piece of software that you can run your website. So my guess is in 10 years or 5 years, whatever, there'll be some of these off-the-shelf DAOs DAOs that you can just, you can take it, you can do with fairly simple modification. And that's where I think of the real power for some of these more artistic, creative fields, because they don't have a lot of money. And frankly, they're not overly technical people that are going to be able to get into. But I can definitely see unloading some of that management stuff, because that's always how these things fail. Like these film collectives, they go for a while and then someone just doesn't want to do the work. So if you were able to set it up and there was a lot less work, it would last a lot longer. It would be a much more stronger organization.
Exactly. So yeah, in that respect, I'm sure, there probably is potential there, but like you said, and it's definitely early. It's funny. Just a couple weeks ago, these were topics that we talk about in the Web3 community, all the time. There's all these kinds of conferences and people talk and people, we try to talk about actual problems because it's, everyone's talking about DAOs and NFTs and how great it is, but you have to understand what they're about, and also just have proper adult human behavior, I think. Yeah. So you have the right mindset and doing it properly and not just doing it to take advantage of people, So yeah, we're still early, but something to keep in mind. And again, it's a conversation, right? It has to start somewhere.
Yep, for sure.
So in terms of, you mentioned in terms of your minting experience, I just keep coming back to this, picturing you having all these computers running all day long and minting your frames. What were your key takeaways from that experience? You've minted this. Do you think you're going to do it again?
Yeah, and I would definitely pursue some other ways of doing it, see if there's maybe an easier way of doing it.
Okay.
But I think one of my key takeaways as a Web 2.0 programmer, I've dealt with APIs. The Amazon has an API, and it didn't feel like that, is all I can say. And I understand I wasn't actually, hitting the blockchain directly with my PHP script. It was going through the MetaMask and Rarible. And so it was a little bit clunky just in my own setup. But again, it didn't feel it still feels like there's something that has to happen. Sometimes there just would be no error messages. And it's like, at least when when you're using the Amazon API, it's going to come back with some sort of a message that you can do something with, whether it be error. And as I said, with this, it didn't. So I still think that there's still some sort of rough edges to just be worn off on some of this blockchain. And now I'm kind of curious. Like, I would like to go do a more substantial project where I'm really getting into some more of the code and sort of see. But my initial impression was frankly that there's probably still some ways to go just on the technology front to make things just a little more user friendly before it really does become mainstream.
Well, keep your curiosity going.
Yeah, no kidding.
And your will. I think that's awesome that you, as a screenwriter, producer, and someone in the film industry, is actually trying to adopt this and use it. And I'm sure it's difficult because indies, it's not a blockbuster space, but it's, more power to you.
So, well, thank you. Yeah, as I said, I think it really is a proof of concept. I do think ultimately too, there's some potential for this film to have some historical significance. If this is the direction the film industry goes, I am the first guy to ever do this. So I think if this does become mainstream, I think that there will be some value to these frames. Whether we realize that value in a year or 5 years or 10 years, I don't know. But I do think it is. I'm the head of this spear, for better or for worse. And maybe I've gone out on a limb that's no one else is ever going to go out on. But again, the longer I think about it and the more I talk to people that are in Web3, everybody's pretty positive. Again, the film people kind of give me blank stares or they're a little skeptical, but most of the Web3 people do see what I'm saying, and they think, I think that does have some legs and does have some merit.
No, absolutely. If anything, it's a different shape of collectible, right? And whether or not people want to buy the blurry ones or not, that's a different question. But have the community give you feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Ashley, is there anything that I have not asked that I should ask, or maybe that you want to share with our audience as we wrap this up? I think you've given us a good insight in terms of what your work is and what your project has been and your Web3 endeavors.
Yeah, well, perfect. No, I can't think of any questions. I think this was a great interview, and I think it it covered sort of what I'm doing. I'm very easy to get a hold of. I try and be very down to earth. So just send me an email if anybody has any questions, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. And we'd like to do a giveaway as well. So if anybody would like one of these frames for free, just email me again, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. Just send me your Polygon blockchain address and I can send you some frames. If you want to choose an actual frame, you're more than welcome to do that. And you can go to the ridesharekiller.com/NFTs. And then we have a little app there that you can scroll through all the frames. You can find them. There's different ways of searching for them. And you can kind of find a frame that is available and that you might like to have. And again, just send me a frame number and your Polygon address. And, let's say the first 100 people that do this from your podcast, we're happy to give them a free frame. And if you're interested in just learning about screenwriting, you got a great idea for a screenplay and want to learn about how to potentially sell that as a screenplay, you can always check out my podcast as well, sellingyourscreenplay.com. I have a weekly podcast and I'm interviewing most of the time I'm interviewing indie director producers and heavily leaning toward writers as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, we'll definitely include all the links and everything, the information that you shared in our show notes. I've actually listened to a few of your podcast episodes, so I'm definitely interested in that whole realm. So I'm glad that we actually got to do this, Ashley.
Yeah, no, so am I.
Can you just in terms of your roadmap and what you're planning on, what are your short-term versus long-term plans? Can you let us in on anything that you're working on in the short and long term?
Yeah, so I mean, me and Tony would like to do a sequel, so if we can get some traction with this film, it's definitely the offing. I mean, we have a lot of ideas on how we could continue this as a franchise, so that's definitely going to be a part of it. I do think that as I become more sophisticated in my own Web3 knowledge, I would like to build out more of a community hub, and I see that very much, especially the bigger companies like a Disney, that'd be very easy. They have that infrastructure. So I think it would be great to build a website where you could log in with your blockchain and be a part of, watch the movie and just be a part of this community. Maybe all the sequels will be there. So those are the kinds of things we're thinking about. Just ramping this one up, continue to promote it, and then if we can get any traction, we'll definitely be around for some sequels as well.
Awesome. In the back of my mind, I'm just thinking, should I ask him what Eric Roberts is like?
So he's a really nice guy. Yeah, no, he's a really nice guy. And, I think, there's guys, I mean, he's a real character too. You get these guys on set like him and you know why he's made a living as an actor, because he really is. He likes to be the center of attention and he's a real character and he can just entertain you, just by sitting in a chair and people crowd around him and he tells all of these great stories. So he's just an entertaining guy. And that's really what I found. Most of these actors that really do reach that higher level, they really do have just an entertaining quality to them.
Right.
That's just, obviously you hear stories of some of them being jerks or whatever, but I just think a guy like Eric Roberts, he just likes to work. I mean, obviously his career has started to fade a little bit, so he's happy to just be out there doing movies, and he brings it, and as I said, he was a great addition to our cast and had a lot of fun working with him.
Well, that's awesome. It sounds cool. And Ashley, thanks so much for talking with me today. You've not only set the stage in terms of Web3 use cases in the film industry on our podcast, in the overall film industry, I have faith, and NFTs are definitely paving a future path beyond just the typical JPEGs and artwork. And
for sure,
I do think that they'll be a part of useful community and membership solutions. Again, I add the sovereign ownership component to it.
Yep.
And in terms of DAOs, we're still early, but if there's a common set purpose and a dedicated goal, and if sort of the roots are set properly, then there's definitely potential.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm fascinated by DAOs as well. I pose this one question to you as a person in Web3. It's definitely one step closer to the Matrix. Like, we are offloading a lot of our information, and it's just, we are getting 1 and 2 step as these DAOs become, and it's definitely something to kind of think about. We are automating a lot of our lives away.
Yes. Well, in terms of how I see it, I mean, I'm doing this podcast partly also to learn a lot about what's going on. I don't have a technical background. I'm an ex-investment banker, so I was in finance for a while, who sort of got disenchanted by the whole just what it's all about. But there is an unease with, I think DAOs is just more of like a technical tooling thing. And I think it sounds, automated matrix. That's not, I'm not so concerned in terms of that. I think there could be a lot of good that can come out of DAOs. I'm still on the fence with the metaverse, what the metaverse means and how we're going to create it. But the thing is, that's why we need to have these conversations, because we're the ones who are going to pave the way in creating all of these components, right? We can't just wait for someone to do it for us. So, just to not to end with a cliche, but it is important to have the conversations and think about it that way. But yeah, I can get a little matrixy and freaked out when I have these conversations. But yeah.
So, well, perfect, Nina. I really appreciate you taking a chance and having me on as well.
Sure thing.
As I said, anybody who has any questions or just wants to contact me, talk more about this, please just email me, info@sellingyourscreenplay.com. I'm very available.
Great. Ashley, thanks again.
Thank you. We'll talk to you guys later.
Thanks again to our guests, and thank you everyone for listening. Thanks also to the Bariam Music team for providing their music. You can check them out on bariammusic.com. All of the supporting information is on our website, blockchainrecorded.com. You can listen to us on Google, Apple, and Amazon podcasts, as well as on YouTube, Spotify, Radio Public, and Stitcher. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube, where we are super grateful for your support. Stay tuned for our next episode.